Hi, I'm Dr. Gerard Guillory with the Care Group in Denver, Colorado. Come on in for your personal consultation. Today we're going to be talking about two very common nutritional deficiencies that you may be hearing more about if you haven't already. And the first one I'd like to talk about is vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D deficiency is associated with 16 different types of cancer, high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, multiple sclerosis, and increased risk of heart attack. There was a study done 2 years ago to show that if you're a male and your vitamin D level is low, you're twice as likely to have a heart attack. Now stop and think about that for a minute. You're twice as likely to have a heart attack if your vitamin D level is low. And I would guess that most of you watching this program are vitamin D deficient. And that's based on our experience in my office. I first heard about this in 2006 when I had the good fortune of going to the Harvard Nutrition Roundtable meeting, heard a lecture about vitamin D deficiency, and before that time we really weren't checking that many levels. When I returned from that trip, we started checking patients, and sure enough, most of the patients were low, and as we began casting a wider net, and I checked my own level and found that it was low in the middle of the summer, I was really pretty shocked. And since that time, more and more evidence is coming out regarding this very important vitamin, which brings up an important point. Vitamin D is not really a vitamin. Vitamin D is actually a hormone, and if it were appropriately classified, if discovered today, it would be classified as a hormone. And just about everything you can think of benefits from vitamin D. Every cell in the body has a vitamin D receptor. That's one of the things that makes it more hormone-like. The other thing that makes vitamin D more hormone-like is the fact that it is actually synthesized from cholesterol. So your adrenal hormones like cortisol and DHEA are actually synthesized from cholesterol, as is vitamin D and your various sex hormones. So it's very important. You really can't live without it, and we're learning more and more about vitamin D deficiency. We did almost 2,000 vitamin D levels in our office last year, and one of the things that I noted this past flu season was we didn't see the numbers of respiratory infections, cold and flu, that we would ordinarily see, and the reason being vitamin D is very helpful in preventing respiratory infections. We probably saw 20% of the respiratory infections that we would ordinarily see this time of year, and the reason being is that we really preach vitamin D replacement to our patients. We did a study with the local fire department and found that 23 of 24 firefighters were deficient in vitamin D in the summer. If I were the Surgeon General of the United States, I would make vitamin D testing mandatory, or at least take out public service announcements and send everybody a bottle of vitamin D with some of this economic stimulus. One paper that I read suggested we could decrease healthcare costs by 20 to 30% just by replacing vitamin D levels. And when you consider that the majority of the population in areas that don't get a lot of sunlight are going to be deficient. Here in Colorado, most of the people we see that aren't taking supplemental vitamin D are deficient. So we replace their vitamin D, it helps with their blood pressure, they feel better, we're preventing respiratory infections, and guess what? Your mood will improve if you take vitamin D, and you'll sleep better. So we recommend that you take your vitamin D at night. Have you ever thought about why you get tired when you've been out in the sun all day, laying on the beach, really not doing anything? It's your vitamin D level rising in response to sunlight. Probably the best single natural treatment for insomnia. The other deficiency that you're going to hear more about is iodine deficiency. Now, iodine deficiency used to be a very common problem until they put iodine in salt back in 1924. Prior to that time, up to 1/3 of the population in given areas were experiencing an enlarged thyroid, or what we call a goiter, a very unattractive problem to have. And then it was learned that it was actually iodine deficiency that was causing this goiter. Now, iodine is an important constituent for the thyroid hormone molecule, and if you don't have enough iodine, then your thyroid gland tries to compensate for that by becoming larger, causing the goiter. So what are the symptoms of iodine deficiency, and why is it more common now than it used to be? Iodine deficiency, as I mentioned, was very common before they put iodine in salt. So what have we been told to do? Avoid salt, which is something that we should do because we know that too much salt can contribute to hypertension and other problems. So we're avoiding salt. Those of us that are more health conscious are switching to sea salt, which is what I recommend, an unrefined sea salt. But the problem with the sea salt is it's not fortified with iodine. And the other issue that's occurred is iodine was part of the commercial bread making process, and now in many cases they are using bromide instead of iodine, so that has contributed to the problem as well. So what are the symptoms of iodine deficiency? As I mentioned, iodine is an important constituent of the thyroid hormone molecule, so if you're iodine deficient, you're going to get the same symptoms that you would associate with iodine deficiency, or with underactive thyroid. You're going to be tired and cold and constipated, and everything's going to slow down because the thyroid hormone controls your metabolism. Iodine deficiency also has been associated with increased risk of breast cancer, fibrocystic breasts, cysts on the ovaries. As it turns out, the thyroid gland and the breasts and the ovaries take up most of the iodine in the body. So vitamin D deficiency and iodine deficiency are two things that you ought to be aware of, and I would recommend taking a replacement of both. Now, the best way to get vitamin D is probably through sunshine. Vitamin D is the sunshine vitamin, and this is where the vitamin D experts and the dermatologists are at odds with each other. You can get a good healthy dose of vitamin D by spending about 10 minutes or so in the sun, but it really depends on where you live. As you move further away from the equator, you get exposed to less sunlight, and you might need to spend a little bit more time in the sun, or you could just take a vitamin D supplement. For iodine, there's some natural ways to get extra iodine. You can go to your local health food store and you can get kelp, for example, which is a natural way to get iodine. The Japanese don't have the problem with iodine deficiency that we do because they eat a lot of seaweed and kelp and sea vegetables. So get some sunshine, eat some kelp, you're going to be in good shape.